Hello, and welcome to part 2 of this 5-part series on data binding. In part 1, we just kind of introduced the idea of data binding, what it is, how it works, and how it benefits the developer. Here in part 2, we're going to get more hands-on. We're going to create a movie class that we will have 3 different fields, just the title, rating, and year, and then we're going to do a simple binding to the UI. So what I've done so far in Visual Studio 2013 is just created a new Universal App project. And with the Universal App projects, you get 3 different folders. You get one for the Windows project, one for the Windows Phone project, and one for the shared project. And the way this works is any code that's going to be the same for both Windows and Windows Phone, you drop it into the shared folder, and then you only have to update that code once instead of having 2 separate files for both the Windows and Windows Phone projects. So that's kind of the basic idea behind the universal apps. Since my main page.xaml is going to look the exact same for both Windows and Windows Phone projects, I'm going to drag this one down to the shared folder, and then I'll delete the one that's in both of the corresponding projects so that they're both referencing the same main page. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a movie class to our shared folder because it'll be referenced in both the Windows and Windows Phone projects. So if I right click on the shared folder, I can come over to add and add new item, and I'll choose class and call it movie and give it a second for it to pop up. And I've already written the code for this, so I'll copy and paste it and then give a little explanation on what it is. So very simply, I've got a title string, a rating string, and a year string. And then I've got a get and set for each of those. So a very, very simple class, not much to it. Now the next thing I want to do is just kind of set up my UI in my main page. So I'll open the main page.xaml. I'll resize this a bit so I can see my code. And what I'm going to do is just add a stack panel into my grid that contains 3 different text blocks, each of which will display one of those properties of our movie object. So one for the title, one for the rating, and one for the year. So fairly simple. So the first part is to just add the stack panel, and then within the stack panel I'll add a text block, and I'll say text equals binding, and then now I'm going to give it the property of the movie object we want to bind to, and I'm going to bind to the title. And then I've already defined a style for this for these text blocks. I won't go through that, but I'll just reference it here. This just helps to see it on the screen, makes it a little bit bigger than it is by default, the font size, and it centers it. So let me I'll copy that a couple times, and then I'll change these. Like I said, one is binding to the title, one is binding to the rating, and one is binding to the year. So we have the UI set up. Now we need to open the code behind to set the data context of our page to an instance of our movie object, right? So after we have that instance, that's how these properties, these binding statements tell which property of that instance we want to display and bind to in our text block. So let me open the main page.xaml.cs. And here, the first thing we want to do is just create a movie instance in our class. So movie, and I'll just call it lowercase movie. And I don't need to initialize it yet. And now we need to add an event handler for the main page loaded. So it's an event that's triggered when our main page is completely loaded. So it's this dot loaded plus equals and then tab twice. It'll generate our event handler. And in the event handler is where we're going to initialize our movie object. So movie equals new movie. Then I'll come in, excuse me, and I'll set the title for the movie. So movie.title equals, and the first one I'll say it's X-Men. Then the movie.rating is PG-13. and the movie.year is 2014. Now the very last thing we need to do is take this instance of the movie object and set it as the data context for our page. So this data context equals our movie object instance. And now since we've created that movie instance, our binding statements are now valid. So let's run this as a Windows 8 app on the local machine. And now you can see in our app that we have that information that we were expecting bound to the UI. So exactly what we were looking for. I'll close that. Now just to kind of take advantage of this universal app idea, I'm going to switch over my debug target to a Windows Phone project. And I'm going to run the same exact code in the emulator. And it'll take us a couple seconds to come up. And hopefully we'll see the same thing. Alright, and there we go. So the same thing that we saw in the Windows 8 project. Remember, same exact code running on both platforms using the universal Windows app project. Perfect. So in our next video in part 3, we're going to cover implementing the iNotify property change interface in our movie class. So stay tuned for that.